All right, welcome back to our Worship Summit live video series.
Next up, we have Jake Gosselin of Churchfront.
And Jake is going to be going over worship technology and what you can do on a budget to make a big difference. A lot of great little tips and tricks he's learned over the years. Cannot wait to get into this presentation.
It's a lot of tech, guys. Get out your paper and pencil.
Now I'm going to let you take it away, Jake. I'm very excited to hear about, I've been following along with your journey. I'm a subscriber on all the platforms, and I love the way that you take everybody into different churches around the country. And I feel like your presentation today kind of draws on the knowledge from many different churches and is today kind of aimed at churches that are just getting started, maybe on a smaller budget, trying to figure out their way into maybe a little bit about like what Dave was talking about, trying to do more with less almost. And I'm really interested to know the hacks, the tips and the tricks that you've learned along the way.
So I'm excited to share them. All right, will do. So I'm going to go ahead and my slide here for you guys. So awesome. Looks like that's working okay. So guys, my presentation today, it's called the Worship Tech Guide for Small Churches. Really though, a lot of this can apply to the size church you are. The goal here is to help you increase excellence and creativity without mega church resources. I think so many of us get hung up on the whole resource question. Of course, there's a real factor there, but I think exciting time, never before has such powerful technology become so accessible for a lot of us. So I'll tell you a little bit more about where I'm at so you guys will understand a little bit more about the context where I'm coming from. So we'll dive into that here in a few minutes. So let's just dive in. So here's what we're going to talk about in this presentation. First, we're going to talk about, why your church should leverage technology. So let's get some mindset stuff right about technology, why it's important in worship. And then we're going to talk about how to avoid technology idolatry. This is another sort of piece of the mindset stuff. I'm going to get through that stuff pretty quickly, but I just want to make sure we approach implementing tech in worship in a way that's pastorally responsible and thoughtful. So yeah, this is going to be the meat of the presentation. It's really just want to provide you guys with a roadmap for building a robust worship tech infrastructure. And we're going to unpack the 5 steps. And the reason I wanted to hone in on these 5 steps is that I think a lot of us, we look up to some of the larger churches like, Bethel, Elevation, Life Church, and we're like, I want to have this amazing live stream at our church of like 200 people, just like that, where it's like, I think you can. A lot of these tools like PTZOptics creates a lot of great tools for you guys to use for something like that. But sometimes we have to consider the sequence before we get to these like super, big dreams and goals we have to like hit these like high levels of production and excellence. Because I'm just just as much of a nerd about these things as many of you are. But at the same time, in my own ministry, what I've seen, as well as in other ministries that I'm helping out with, there's just a sequence. You got to get these things right when you're building out your worship tech infrastructure. So we're going to dive deep into that. So a little bit more about me. You're probably like, who is this dude if you never heard of me? My name's Jake. I lead worship church called Mission Lakewood. And it's a church based in Lakewood, Colorado. I'm in Littleton, Colorado. That's where my office is. And part-time worship leader. Mission Lakewood's been around for 2 years. We are a church that has anywhere between 80 to 120 people on a Sunday. So I am very familiar with leading worship in a smaller church environment. That's what I've been doing most of my life. So then I also, alongside of being a worship leader, I'm a YouTuber, content creator. It's been fun. About 3 years ago is when I started publishing consistently to YouTube. And now the channel's grown to like 70,000 subscribers. It's just a lot of fun creating content, helping people out, hopefully inspiring folks on what's possible, especially on this specific topic. So these are some pictures from our Bethel Tech Tour video. It's probably my favorite project we've worked on so far. We get to go hang out with their crew for a day at a conference and just take a bunch of video. That was literally, I was just like looking through my camera the whole day. So the channel's been helping a lot of folks out. So make sure you subscribe. We got every week 1 or 2 videos coming out. We'd love to see you over there. And then my main thing is worship leader school. This is like what Churchfront, the main thing Churchfront does, the main service or product we provide. We come alongside of worship teams, both the worship leaders and tech leaders. Often both of them work with our team through a coaching and training. So that's the favorite part of what I do. It's just a whole lot of fun. So we do kind of a combination of coaching, and then we have the online course platform. So that's enough about me. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to make sure, I guess I'll probably talk here for like maybe 30 minutes. I'm not sure how long this is going to go. I didn't really give it a full run through, but I'm going to keep an eye on my clock, make sure I'm wrapping up the presentation around 12:30. Maybe I'll have time for some questions at the end. So moving on, why should we implement technology in our churches? And this is the thing I want to push back on this sort of assumption, unfortunate assumption that more like implementing tech is like an evil thing. Like I got a picture of Ultron here, right? He's the embodiment of tech gone evil. And sadly, this is just kind of a common misconception that are in a lot of churches. I think there's this like false dichotomy between we want worship that has a high spiritual impact, or no, we want worship that's excellent and has high production value. And right up front, I just want to say that dichotomy is a false dichotomy. These two things, we can hold these things together. I think you really can lead worship that's pastorally responsible, spiritually engaging. Whether you're leading from the platform as a musician, worship leader, or if you're, leading the tech team, you can do this in a way that's pastorally thoughtful, but then you can also do it in a way that's really excellent, that's creative, and ultimately really helps communicate the gospel in a way that's relevant and just more effective for the current culture and time that we live in. So I wanted to debunk this idea. It's so common in so many churches that like technology is evil, because here's what happens. If you don't leverage tech in worship, it's just going to be a confusing hindrance. Maybe you guys have already come across this before, but all of us need some sort of amplification for our speakers, for our band, for our pastors. And, we need visuals so the congregation can participate in worship. And you can't really just put this stuff aside and expect it to just come together without no intentionality or effort at all. And if you don't put the time to learn it, to master it, to implement it properly, it's just going to be a confusing hindrance and a headache. Also, if you don't leverage tech right, your ministry is pretty much, just going to sound awful. And I realize here, I want to make sure that my little video preview isn't blocking your guys' view. There we go. What happens? That's what that says there on the top. What I was saying is that your ministry will sound awful if we're not leveraging these tools properly. I think we had some talks today even about the audio engineering for worship. Such an important aspect of what we do to help, get the audio part of our worship services across. The next thing, if we don't make this shift to leverage tech, is that, the gatherings are just going to be visually unappealing. And it's going to be something that people will, be in church and they rather like look at their phone or whatever, or they'll just be easily distracted instead of engaging with the actual content of worship, the songs, the sermon, etc. Next, you're just going to experience a ton of distracting mistakes. So this is definitely no good. If you're not intentional with tech, it can become a huge distraction. Cues can be missed. Things can just, fail on you if it's not set up properly. And those distractions take away from people's focus on why they worship God, to hear his word, to apply it to their lives. So now let's talk about what will happen when you do leverage tech, and you do so with the proper amount of intentionality and thoughtfulness. First, your ministry will sound just more professional. People will come, it'll sound pleasing, whether it's the mix of the band, whether it's listening to the pastor, and they probably won't intentionally think about it sounding amazing. But it just, sometimes getting these things right, and it prevents those distractions. Next, visuals that you use, whether that's lighting, whether that's displays with lyrics, videos, it's going to enhance the way you can communicate the gospel. You're going to be able to leverage our human sense of sight to connect better with the congregation again. And for me, I think in this age, we're used to screens, we're used to the cinema experiences and stuff like that. I think we'd have to really leverage these tools, and we just can't expect to not be using these things in a worship environment. And the church has been using these things for a very long time. Today we have LED walls or big wide screens and projectors. 500 years ago was stained glass, and they're both visual ways to tell the gospel story. Next, we've got eliminating distracting mistakes. That's the next important thing that's going to happen when we leverage tech. And this is just a huge one. And again, all this stuff is kind of interrelated. It's just when you're not intentional about tech, or you're like, our church doesn't care about tech. Like, we don't want to get all fancy or whatever. Often those are going to be the same churches that have like really distracting mistakes, whether the sound is horrible, whether cues are missed, whether maybe the design of your visuals is just like looks atrocious, like it was designed for like 20 years ago. That can be really distracting for people who have a taste for design in your congregation. And then finally, when you do leverage tech, you're going to increase creative potential. I say finally, I think this is my last point. But this is the fun one, especially in smaller churches where you have less volunteers, less team members, less resources. You can still use tech to accomplish more with less. And that's a big part of what we do at our church. Even though we're a smaller church of about 100 people, arguably we're doing more creatively than some of the much larger ministries in our area, but not because we're amazing. It's just because we're able to leverage these tools. For example, so here's a picture of our tech booth, right? Simple. We get our mixing console, and we have 2 computers, one for like presentation and one for capturing the service with Wirecast there. And the point I'm trying to make is like, we have a 2-member production team for our church services at Mission Lakewood. You'll see in some of what we've got running and some of these systems we have in place, even with 2 volunteers on a given Sunday. And then finally, this is actually related a lot to like what PTZOptics, and their team equips you to do, is like, you can then share your worship gatherings, with the world when you're leveraging tech. So you can reach, those at your church and your community who are kind of homebound, and you can, be able to, even for those considering come to your church for the first time, these tools is important. I know we put our sermons up so that people can get a taste of that before they come. So that's a little bit why your church should leverage technology, and how to avoid this like technology idolatry issue that I come across sometimes. A couple things, because we just don't want to make tech an idol. Rather, it's a tool. Really, it's just a means to an end. So we got to remind ourselves of that as tech nerds once in a while, and just ask a couple questions. When you're considering a new piece of tech or software you want to implement, first, like, how does this tool increase participation in worship? Really, how is this serving the congregation for them to engage more? How is it also eliminating distractions? What common distractions are happening, and then what tool can we implement to get rid of those things? And then how does this tool help us communicate the gospel better? Maybe it's like lighting or visuals. How can we communicate themes of praise or adoration more effectively and affect the mood with this lighting scene? How can we use these tools to communicate maybe more reflection or nature, or more of a confessional mood in worship? So there's all sorts of rich gospel themes that we can, as artists in our canvas, as worship tech leaders, we can use these tools to really emphasize these themes and drive the points in the message of the gospel home. And don't fall prey to worship tech FOMO, fear of missing out. For example, Pro Presenter 7 just came out this week, big deal in the tech world, lots of hype around it. I highly recommend, as someone who's already gone and made that upgrade, just wait a couple weeks or a month or two if you really want to, play it a little bit smarter. I've already come across glitches with it that, I couldn't use this software this coming Sunday with our setup because they have some bugs they got to work out with it still. So just don't fall prey to this stuff. Or, if you see a church running a big fancy, Digico board, it's like, oh, we need that. No, you don't. So don't fall prey to FOMO. We really got to think through what set of tools work best for your local church. It's really going to be custom to your scenario. I think there's a lot of principles you'll take away here. These 5 key steps that can be applied in every church context. But your church is very unique, and don't forget that. And the cool thing, these 5 steps I'm going to unpack now for the system. You don't need mega church resources. And when I say church resources, I'm saying like you can build a really robust infrastructure for less than $50,000. That's on like the fancier end. I think if you look at Mission Lakewood Church, where I lead worship, we're portable. And if you added up all of our worship tech, it's roughly around $50K for everything: sound, lighting, display, track rigs, all that stuff we've got going on. And sometimes some churches we worked with, we help them set up stuff for less than $25K, and then sometimes less for $5K. Obviously not an entire system, but you can have an amazing, even audio sound system, a decent one for under $5K, or maybe under $10K. I'm not really good at the math here, but you guys get the point. We're not talking multiple 6-figure budgets, go hire, a huge integrator, and, have to do a capital campaign. A lot of these things you can do on a relatively small budget. And you don't need to implement these all at once, but there is a sequence. So if you're starting from scratch, follow the sequence. Maybe you already have some things in place. Identify which of these steps you guys could improve on. And these tools I'm about to unpack will help you increase excellence, eliminate distractions, and expand your creative capacity. So let's dive into the 5 steps. Step number 1, sound. This is a really important one. First one to focus on. So let's dive in. A lot of churches have these analog consoles still. Please sell this as quickly as possible and get a digital console. There are so many great advantages. There's maybe like one advantage. Honestly, I don't think there's any advantages over analog compared to digital. So get a digital console and a digital stage box. These are the first 2 things I'm always recommending the churches to do if they don't have them yet. And here are some recommended mixers. I'm going to move my little video here in Ecamm. We've got the Behringer X32, probably the most popular. We've also got the new Behringer Wing coming out, Midas board, PreSonus, Yamaha, TF, Allen and Heath. A lot of these like sub $3,000 mixers are amazing for churches and like, the sub 300 people, or even I've seen bigger churches run a lot of these consoles too. Sometimes you don't even have to get caught up in what your attendance is with how big or fancy of a mixer you need. But a digital mixer is a great first. It's going to be just like a really foundational tool for all these other ones we'll talk about. And a stage box. Get a digital stage box so you can have the flexibility of routing your instruments and mics to the mixer. You'll also have return sends here that you can use for in-ear monitor mixes. That's another foundational tool for everything else we're about to talk about. If you do these things out of sequence, you're just going to run into headaches. Next big piece of sound infrastructure is in-ear monitoring. Get this, because then your band's going to be able to start using a click in tracks. Then you're also going to be able to start automating things. Again, this is all building like the foundation. And then I always want to recommend people, consult with a local audio company on your PA system and acoustic design of the room. In most cases, I found that like if churches just switch out their analog console and stage box with a digital ecosystem, that's really all they need to do. And maybe they could have a professional come help them like dial in the system, tune the room or whatever. Just don't forget that sometimes the acoustics of your room can be adjusted if there's major problems there. So with this step of getting a digital sound console in place and a digital stage box, you're going to have much better sound, consistent sound. You have it's basically computers built into these things doing all the processing of gain, of compression, gates, EQs, all this stuff that professional mix engineers use to like make things sound awesome on a record that you've heard or at a concert. Like these consoles, which are now less than a couple $1,000s, can do all that stuff for your church. And it's going to give you the right infrastructure for running tracks and then for running automation. And then, especially if you're getting into broadcast, like it's going to give you much better flexibility for having better broadcast audio. That's a huge piece of that. And I know a lot of folks talking about live streaming today in those other sessions, but I really think like you're not going to have a great live stream until you've gotten the sound issues right and the right infrastructure in place. So step number 1 is sound. Hopefully you guys are keeping up with me because I'm moving fast. I'm keeping an eye on that clock and we got a lot more to go through. Step number 2 is lighting. You want to make sure that your stage and your room is well lit. You're going to have creative control over the mood of, the worship gathering. You can direct attention of the congregation to the right places on the stage. So lighting is an important tool. God gave us a sense of sight, and often we're so caught up about, getting the sense of sound right in worship, but we totally disregard sense of sight, which I think is even more powerful in a lot of ways. You don't have to have, this is kind of a fancier lighting system. You don't have, like, some people will be like, your church looks like a club or something like that. For some churches, it's not appropriate. Here's a good example of a more traditional church, but with still solid lighting. They've got some colored lights in the back, give them, creative control there, but they've got good front spotlights. This is a more traditional setup. Observe the fundamentals of 3-point lighting. Make sure you've got, good front lightings. I like using ellipsoidal spotlights at a 45-degree angle, maybe a back hair light. This is so foundational, especially if you're going to broadcast as well. Like, if you want things to look good on camera, you got to light things well. I've learned this because I'm a YouTuber. I've done lots of video work. Light is so important. You could have a $100,000 red cinema camera and things aren't lighted properly. It's just going to look like trash. That's like one of the biggest difference between a pro look versus an amateur look. So make sure you have a great lighting system in place. So here's some of the fixtures we use at our church. We've got some ETC Source 4 spotlights. Then we've got some Blizzard wash lights on these trusses here. Then we've got our lighting software, Light Key, runs on a Mac. I love it. And I want to stop here and let you guys know, I'm going to give you a link to where you can see all of these tools that I use and link URLs to them and stuff like that. Because you're probably like, he's moving 100 miles an hour. I'm trying to take notes on what he's talking about, and you can't because I'm going too fast. So I'm going to give you a link later on in the presentation to go to that in our worship ministry toolkit. So don't feel like you have to write this down. So the key benefits of lighting: it's going to look professional. People won't be distracted in worship because they won't be like straining their eyes to like see your pastor or see a worship leader. It's going to also, you can help focus the attention of the congregation, whether that's going to be on the person leading a song, the pastor, whether that's maybe the screen and you need to drop the lighting so just the screen is showing. It helps control the mood or energy of worship. And then you can automate lights. If you have a really good system, Light Key can be automated, which is awesome. And then, as I already mentioned, you're going to get sufficient lighting for cameras and broadcast, whether you're taking photos, whether you're streaming to Facebook with your PTZOptics camera, or whatever other gear you're using. Lighting is so crucial. So that's step number 2 of our 5 steps. Sound was step number 1. Step number 2 is lighting. Now, step number 3 is the lyrics and video display. So this is a pretty obvious one, really important to make sure we have the infrastructure for our congregation to sing along, to see scripture passages, to see sermon notes, or whatever else they need to see in worship. So that's a common setup here, is like a center widescreen, or maybe two wide screens on each side, or maybe 3. Really doesn't matter. But we got to get the right tools in there. And then software. This is I actually just had a worship leader ask me yesterday, like, why should I use ProPresenter or Proclaim over PowerPoint? It's just like you're using it's I didn't really think about that question because it kind of seems so simple, but like people are asking that question still. ProPresenter and Proclaim were designed specifically for this worship environment. I know Easy Worship is another one too. And PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides, whatever, you're just so limited. Your workflows are so inefficient. These other softwares make it so much quicker to get your sets built. It makes it so much quicker to design different slides on the fly. So make sure you use one of these pieces of software because they're amazing tools. Avoid using PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides, etc. So the key benefits of getting this right software in place, for presentation is the congregation obviously is going to be able to sing and read along. You're going to have visually appealing graphics. This is a big one. Graphics matter these days, especially I know I'm a millennial, so I'm all fussy about design and graphics and stuff like that. Fortunately, there's a lot of great tools out today that make it so easy. You know, whether it's if you're designing slides, I know Proclaim and Faith Life has a bunch of great templates that look great. Church Motion Graphics is a great resource for backgrounds. Same as Visual Church Media, another great one. So many great resources out there. You know, get away from using the old school fonts and clip art and things like that. And as I already said, you know, you'll have a better prep time, more efficient workflow with these tools like Proclaim or ProPresenter. Proclaim I especially love because of the cloud functionality. So I was a longtime ProPresenter user. Now we're using Proclaim because I started using that for the past couple months. And then now we're going to go back to ProPresenter 7 once they fix the particular bug that they have right now. Actually has to do with automation. We'll go back to that. So then what's cool is the automated control of these pieces of software. So you've probably experienced missed lyric cues, and that's like, for me, the most annoying thing. So Proclaim and ProPresenter, I don't know about the other ones, but Proclaim and ProPresenter can easily be automated through whether you're running MIDI from Ableton or whether it's from Prime or Playback apps. They just came out with that feature with those apps, which is awesome. So really, really great way to eliminate distracting mistakes. So you have your lyrics on time all the time. So that's step number 3. So far we've done sound, then we did lighting, and then we did lyrics and video display. These are like the 3 big ones. Like if you get these 3 things done really well, you're going to be ahead of most churches out there. This is the next step I would recommend, especially in smaller churches, again, to increase excellence and the level of creativity that you can implement at your church is automation. And this is a scary one for a lot of folks, but this is really fun. It seems intimidating at first, but there's so much cool stuff. So basically, you can use tools like Ableton Live, and I know Will Doggett, who's like the kind of like the Yoda Jedi of Ableton in worship. He was just on telling you guys all about the functions of this software, what it can do for you. So, you know, I just want to second that and emphasize it. And it's just amazing, like what you can do with this stuff. So Ableton, I've been running Ableton for like 3 to 4 years now. I still do because I just love setting things up in arrangement view. I love having kind of this canvas to set up our whole worship service. And we can send MIDI cues, you know, to control light key, ProPresenter, Proclaim, anything else. Just so many cool things. So it's like at the beginning of service when we start, it's just like our music director, keyboardist presses one button, you know, lights go out, the right lyrics come up, and then bam, the service just happens. We never have later missed lyric cues. And what I love about this is as a worship leader, I just don't stress about all these things. You know, I can just focus on leading my congregation and then everything else takes care of itself. And it would be cool if we had like a 5-person production team and we had a producer on comms being able to call out cues. Like, that's awesome, except there's still mistakes that happen that way, especially if the team isn't well rehearsed. But we have just those 2 volunteers, as I mentioned, in our tech booth, and we have all these cues happening, you know, at perfect timing. So yeah, Ableton Live, it's just another picture of it. And the main, you know, pieces of software you can look to now for doing this. 1 is Ableton, 2 is Prime, and then 3 is Playback. Prime and Playback just released capability to do this. It's really awesome because those are iPad apps. Prime also runs on Mac, but these are both track software. Now they can send MIDI out, and they're great. I'm still a bigger fan of the workflow customization of Ableton Live. I have such a hard time like being creative working in an iPad, and some of the things are just, with those pieces of software specifically, doesn't make sense for our team and the way we set up our track. So, but they're still there. And maybe you're already using Prime or Playback. You could start automating lyrics and or lighting now in worship with those tools. And then hardware wise, you know, we have a laptop on our stage. That's our tracks and our keys rig. So it runs Ableton and it runs MainStage. Depending on what Ashton, our keyboard player, wants to do. Sometimes he runs keyboards from main stage. Sometimes he likes to run keys from Ableton. And that's kind of a cool thing about Ableton is it can run your tracks and be your keyboard at the time. Such a powerful tool. Mac, you can run Prime on a Mac or an iPad device, and then playback only runs on an iOS, like iPad or an iPhone. So make sure, I would recommend having a dedicated computer for that setup, or iPad if you go the playback or Prime route. So the key benefits of automation: no more miscues or distractions, and then high production quality, even with a small team. So that's step 4. Now let's move on to step 5. We've got broadcast. In this one, you guys, I mean, this is an event that PTZOptics is hosting. So there's already been a lot of great content about, broadcasting your worship service. PTZOptics has so many great tools for this, and they're equipping a ton of teams. And yeah, this is great though. Like, I feel like in the sequence of things though, I will say, if you want an amazing broadcast, make sure you get the other 4 things right. Because, I have so many worship leaders or tech team leaders coming to me being like, oh, I want to improve our broadcast mix. And then I ask, like, what mixing console are you using? And they're like, oh, we're using like this 15-year-old analog Mac keyboard. Like, it's like, well, yeah, like if you're like a pro mix engineer, you could probably figure it out, but like, you're just not starting with the right infrastructure to really have a quality mix. Ideally, you should have a second mixer somewhere in a different room, and they can mix a completely different mix from than what you hear at front of house. So it's tempting to look at Bethel. This is a picture of like their broadcast video village when we were hanging out with them at that conference, and just be like, I want a Bethel broadcast quality, and we're a church of 50 people. And you just have to have realistic expectations about the end result that your church can actually achieve. Because Bethel, Elevation, Life Church, I mean, they dropped probably over 6 figures on a lot of their infrastructure to make this possible. Then they have professional team members making it work. So be realistic about, your goals, aspiration for your broadcasts, whether for video, for your mix, and start with the right tools here. And I would recommend, use audio and video, a separate computer dedicated to that, computer that can run OBS or vMix or Wirecast. I've been using Wirecast. I'm a Mac guy. That's what you see on this computer here. We actually just use Wirecast to like record the sermon. We're not streaming at my church. We're just like recording the sermon, and we have a really efficient workflow with it. And then we just publish it right after the service. And that's another thing too. Maybe strategically, streaming like isn't a pressing priority for every church everywhere. So you got to kind of be discerning, through what makes the most sense. But hardware wise, you can use cameras like we have the PTZOptics pan tilt zoom camera. So like I said, we're not even streaming, but we're able to use this camera for at least the recording functionality. It goes right into this software here, Wirecast, and then at the end of the service, we have good video with the audio embedded, and then it's ready uploaded to YouTube and published to our website. So again, here's another screenshot of Wirecast, and you'll see we have 2 layers. We've got the PTZOptics camera here, and then we've got the Dante virtual sound card we're using Dante for audio. That's a whole other big audio tool I didn't even cover in the audio section, but another great one you can implement. Cool. Doing pretty well on time because I'm about to wrap this up in a couple minutes. Key benefits. Your church is going to be able to reach more people online with a robust broadcast setup. You're going to be able to engage the shut-ins, or maybe there's people traveling for business in your church who want to be a part of worship still and be able to just keep up with what's going on. And then a lot of times, like the content you can create when capturing and broadcasting your service, it's good marketing content for your church. A lot of people who are going to be a first-time visitor, they're going to go to your website for sure. And then if there's a service there, they're going to check it out and make sure like you're not some weird cult or something like that. They want to make sure that the church is relatable and they're going to enjoy it when they get there. And then another cool thing about it is when you're capturing your services, you can, even if you're not broadcasting it, you can just review your services for your team. Like your worship leaders, your worship band members can hear themselves, and then That's one of the best ways to improve. So that is step number 5, broadcast. So to recap, get a good sound infrastructure in place. Get a good lighting system, a good lighting rig in place. Step number 3, lyrics in video display. Step number 4, automation. Step number 5, broadcast. And just really make sure, like, a couple tips for implementation. Follow like the 5-step sequence. Don't do things out of order. Really just like, some of the things like are kind of necessities that you have to have now. Like steps 1 through 3, especially, like you can't really have a functioning worship gathering without good sound, the room is lit well, and having a good, lyrics and display. But make sure those are really as strong as they possibly can be. Then look into automation to really make things go smoother, eliminate distractions. And then when you really have a great experience going on there, go ahead and start streaming it to the world, or recording and publishing later. And also start thinking long term. Maybe think like, what can we do this year to improve audio? And then next year, what can we do to improve lighting? The following year, what can we do to start automating, and so on. So don't feel like everything has to be done right now, because you probably don't have the funds for it. That's not realistic. And then you're just going to get overwhelmed. And step number 3, I see so many churches getting these tools and then they just don't know how to use them. They don't take the time to use them, but you got to master them. If you're going to set you and your team up for success, take time to master the tools. So you might be wondering, thanks, Jake. You just gave me a waterfall of information. How do I start? Go to churchfront.com. That's my main website. And you're going to see a big yellow button there. It says Free Worship Ministry Toolkit. So all of our recommended gear and software, we put in that toolkit. It's just this Google sheet. It's got a bunch of pages to it. We've linked all of our YouTube videos to it as well. So like, as you look at things, you'll be able to see like, oh, there's a video where he talks about mixing consoles or whatever, stuff like that. So definitely check out the toolkit and start building out, your own toolkit of what upcoming upgrades could look like. Definitely, you can check out worshipleaderschool.com. Or if you want my team to come alongside you, help you build out a custom tech system and then implement it with both you and your worship leader, I would recommend get together with your worship leader, review some of the things we covered today, review that toolkit, check out my YouTube channel. If you guys want to work with us, just don't hesitate to go to worshipleaderschool.com and reach out. So that concludes my talk. And look at that, 37 minutes. I think we had a couple minutes for questions. That concludes my presentation on worship tech for small churches. So thanks for listening, guys. Hope that added value to your day, and hope everything worked okay.
Jake, it was so great. We're actually here with one of your students, Jay Harmon from the International Family Worship Center. And he just wanted to take a moment to thank you and ask you a question. He actually has now I know everyone doesn't have a worship team this large. He has 12 people on his team, and they're all taking your courses, learning more about, he really loves the way it's kind of like you've kind of simplified a lot of this stuff for the team. Jay wanted to say a few words. Jay, is the mic on? You gotta flip the little button up. And here he is.
Hey, Jake, how are you? I'm well. Yeah, I just want to go ahead. Can I hear him? Is he there?
What's up? Oh, here, I'll take my slides away here too. I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, we're using your classes to actually help train our team with all the audio. And I have to say that it's been a blessing for everybody. It's helped us learn a lot. And I can't say thank you enough in what you do. And it's, like I said, it's helped all of us grow in knowledge and help the team all together. So
thank you, dude. Nothing makes me happier to hear that than people working through this stuff, because I can pass out this information all day, but it's really up to you guys to take it, to actually implement and take action. So great work, and thanks for sharing that encouragement.
Yeah, definitely. Keep up the good work. It's been definitely a blessing.
Thanks.
he's learned a lot from what you've talked about. He has designed some really great backdrops. I guess we could talk about that another time, Jake. But let's get to some of these questions in the chat room. Tess is going to try to find a few. They've been coming through over the past 45 minutes, so there's a lot of them. Again, I just want to let everybody know that Jake will be in the Zoom conference for a little bit. So if we don't get to your question, you can still kind of get a hold of Jake. But here's one from Ronald Marquez. There's two parts to this one. They're a Spanish church of about 1,000 people on Sunday. However, they have 4 services on Sundays, one on Saturday and one on Friday, one on Wednesday. And they always turn their sound. All right, let me give you the... All right, we always turn our sound consoles and Pro Presenter computers on for the whole service. Does that hurt the technology in any way?
If the question is like just having them powered on for that much time I don't think so. I think as long as they're being powered down on when you're not using them, then it should be fine. I'm not a electrical mechanical engineer, so I'm not sure exactly what the lifespan of is a device like that, but I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I would second that. You know, we get a lot of questions for the PTZ cameras, and it's actually okay to leave them on 24/7. They have a 3-year warranty, and we've used these things, leaving them on all the time. Now, clearly, you probably don't want to do that with your main production computers. You probably want to turn them off after Sundays services are over. I think that would probably be a good idea. But yeah, 3 days in a row, I think that's fine. Really, to be honest, I've heard that turning off a computer and then turning it back on takes more power than just leaving it on for 24 hours. Because like kicking it on and turning all that stuff on actually is harder on the motherboard and stuff than just leaving it on if you're going to turn it back on within a short amount of time. Let's keep going, Tess, and then of course
Google says, what's the best way to build a culture within your congregation?
Yeah. I mean, you got to lead by example. And I mean, it's kind of hard to, from that question, it's pretty broad. So it's like, is it with the congregation? Was it with the tech team, worship team? Let's just assume it's for maybe the congregation, maybe a culture of worship where you want people to be more engaged and expressive in worship. I think you got to teach them, like as worship leaders, that's our job, is to teach them like, hey, you know, why do you lift your hands in worship? Well, it's a way to really just show a sign of surrender to God. And this physical posture can actually have an effect on our hearts. So maybe share something like exactly what I just said in 10 seconds once in a while at your church, and people can understand up here. But then I also think leading by example is the biggest thing. So, you know, don't expect your congregation to like be super engaged in worship if you're just buried in your music stand all the time, not looking at them, not making eye contact, not smiling, not really having a worship posture yourself. So yeah, I would say lead by example and look for teaching moments and be bold about it and really challenge people. People like to be challenged to kind of step it up. So don't be afraid to do that.
I think that's great advice. And hopefully we're challenging everyone out there too. I've heard a lot, you know, kind of reiterated through each of our speakers to challenge yourself and, you know, be the best version of yourself that you can be, show up for yourself. And I think it'll kind of, everyone will take themselves more seriously and feel the love that, you know, radiates from that, you know, kind of determination to be excellent. Are we going to keep on going? A couple more? Or are we going to let Jake kind of answer the question?
Maybe cover one more before we skip over to the Zoom chat.
Okay.
And remember, the links for the Zoom call are in the description of the YouTube video or pinned in the comments on Facebook if you want to participate. This question is from James. Jake, what is Dante exactly? What does it do better, and why do you recommend it?
Great question. And yeah, I quickly touched on that in the presentation. And I now realize like that would have been a good thing to explain in about a minute. Dante is a digital audio networking protocol, which is a fancy way of saying you can send audio to and from your mixing console and other computers, any other device that has like a Dante sound card, whether it's a physical sound card that you actually plug your Ethernet cable into, or whether it's a sound card, that's just a software app you can run like on my laptop. And you can send audio to and from these devices. So it just opens up this whole possibility of audio routing. And I think it's been a game changer for my ministry. Because like, for example, we run Ableton Live and Main Stage on the same laptop on our stage. Before Dante, I'd have to get an audio interface that has at least 6 physical analog outputs on it that then would have to go into our stage box, and then, you know, we'd have to get that back to the mixing console. But with Dante, we plug an Ethernet cable into the laptop, and then we can send audio to and from that laptop up to 64 channels of different things of audio anywhere we want to any other device on that network. So hopefully that gives you a good kind of summation of it. I have a YouTube video, just search Dante for worship, and I go much more in depth and I show you exactly what it looks like.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Well, Jake, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the 5 steps. You broke it down for us. There's a lot to dig into. Obviously, Jake can help us with this in a lot of the things that he teaches in the videos that he has. Thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate it.
Wow, what a great presentation.
Yeah, I certainly learned a lot from Jake Gosselin.
Jake is such a great influencer in the space. Don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel because you can learn so much about what he's doing, going behind the scenes with all these great churches. Up next, we have Seth Haberman, the digital pastor.
He's going to be talking about video production software for live streaming, in particular, the popular vMix production software.
He'll be joining us from his church in the Washington State area, so I cannot wait to show you guys it.